I'm joined by Jim O'Neill of BRICS and Goldman Sachs fame, and we're talking Russia. Jim, the US has accused Russian agents of stirring up unrest in Ukraine. Leading academics believe that war is, if not inevitable, it's highly likely. Markets aren't priced for that, are they?
They don't seem to be too worried about it. No, I'd agree with that. I guess the markets have gone through, right at the start, some sort of, oh my God, kind of thing. So since then, they're sort of trying to figure out what is the probability that it would really involve war beyond Ukraine and Russia. And I guess that's the only way you could logically explain how the markets are currently trading.
But even that in itself, a military confrontation between Ukraine and Russia would be highly destabilising for Russia. We saw $50 billion outflows in the first quarter. That would probably accelerate.
Well, kind of, but you've been having outflows from Russia for quite a while, right? So yeah, I don't know, when you say highly destabilising, it's dangerous to always look at these things from a purely Western mentality. Amongst the many interesting and complicated aspects of this is inside Russia, what Putin's doing is really popular. So Russian consumer confidence won't have gone down. And I think that the very latest Russian economic data was marginally better than expected. So the Russian economy has slowed a lot, but there's no real signs of any kind of imminent crisis. And one of the odd things about this is I'm not sure, as of yet, there's anything that's going to make the Russian economy weaker.
Sanctions might
sanctions
do that.
Could be one
real
of those
sanctions,
things.
heavy sanctions,
Right.
and targeted in the right places might do that. What's your take on that?
Well, I have been at a couple of things recently where I've really pondered about this. It's one thing for the Americans to shout and scream and make a lot of big, aggressive noises, sort of Cold War type of mentality, which is in some ways perfectly reasonable. But they don't have a lot to lose, whereas some of the big European economies, Germany and Italy in particular, are heavily involved with Russia. They get a lot of energy from there, they've got direct energy deals, they export a lot there. I was at a big event in Italy just last week with a lot of European business people, and in a survey of where they were most likely to invest more of various big emerging markets, Russia was the second most favourite one after China, which sort of was pretty striking in this context. So not easy for Italian or German policymakers to want to be really tough with Russia, despite the pressure from Washington.
Do you think Italian and German business give two hoots what Obama thinks and vice versa?
Well, it's pretty clear from the response to that survey, which is literally less than a week ago, that the European corporates couldn't care less what Washington's saying. And of course, I'm sure Obama couldn't really care what they're saying, but unless you really cause serious pain to Putin and his supporters, does it really matter what Washington says? I wrote something when this first broke out saying, well, perhaps the real way of hurting Putin is try and get the Chinese on board, because if you go back a bit further, one of the things that really sticks in my memory, the first place that the new premier and the president went to when they were put in power in China was Moscow. So, and of course, as for many other countries, Russia's most rapidly rising trade partner is China. So if the Chinese were going to say this is not right, then I think Putin would probably pay more attention to that.
So the West is trying to court China's favour. Russia's also trying to court China's favour. If Russia's kicked out of G8, what does that do to other international fora, such as G20, for example? Could we see Russia trying to form a stronger, closer alliance with China?
Frankly, in my opinion, the G8 was a bit of a joke anyhow. So in some ways, thank God for the end of G8. How could you have something like that without China in it in the first place? So the valid question is, does it sort of split the G20 into the old sort of industrial democratic powers, or resurrect the power of the G7 and the rest? And that is possible. My impression is that the Russians are now back being a lot more in favour of all things BRIC political leaders. According to my information as sort of Mr. BRIC, the Russians were the ones that dreamt up the idea of the political club. Past couple of years have got a little bit less keen, partly to do with the development bank and why have it, but my very latest information since this mess in Ukraine is the Russians are now trying to court a lot of ideas within the BRIC countries. So
we could see some kind of intra G20 club form.
Well, I think that's the way things are going, and in some ways, right at the core of the whole mess and why the West sort of perhaps misread Putin is that we're living in a world where the world economy has changed so much and inter-economic relationships have changed so much, yet global governance is miles behind. So the G20 is one of the few sort of positive outcomes of this the past decade, but it doesn't do anything. And unless you give these emerging countries more power, a lot of them don't feel that it's a relevant place for them. Lurking below this, and a big topic for the IMF meetings, is the Americans won't put into power what was agreed by them all 3 years ago in the G20 about giving more power to some of these countries in the IMF. And so I think not that the other BRIC countries will sympathise specifically with Russia on the Ukraine issue, but in general they'll have a lot of sympathy with them.